Hi, everybody. I'm just going to get my Instagram going and we will start this Crushing Doubt live Q&A. It's been a while since I've been with you and I'm excited to be here with you. Let me just get the Instagram going and we'll be ready. Okay, here we are on Instagram as well. Good to see you all. Let me just get one other setting set on my computer. Right. Little things objecting to things. So, guys, very good to be back here with you on Crushing Doubt's live Q&A. It's been a little while because I had certain weeks that I had to be off. And actually, the week before, I had Adriana Bucci on, which was a great event. But of course, it didn't allow for us to have our Q&A and let you ask questions about mind-body conditions. So I'm going to talk about why I'm here talking today, why I'm here to talk about mind-body symptoms. So first, let's talk about what mind-body symptoms are. Many of you know this, of course, but for some, they're just tuning in, or maybe they're just catching this. A mind-body symptom is a symptom that is a true physical symptom. It's happening in the body, but it is happening because of what's going on in our minds, and that doesn't mean it's imagined. It's the feelings and the thoughts can lead to actual changes in physiology. So that's what mind-body conditions are. Now, why do I do this? Why do I talk to people about this? Well, I had 8 years of seemingly chronic everyday back pain, and it was absolutely one of the very most worst experiences of my entire life. I didn't have any sense that I was going to get better because I didn't have the right information. The way that society in general thinks about pain and other symptoms is actually quite off base. And we're finding that the science is showing this. So I'm here to talk about all of this stuff. Now, why is a Q&A so important? Well, one of the reasons I do the Q&A is I try to give back to people what I wished I had had when I was getting better. So here's what happened for me when I started getting better. The first thing is I discovered the works of Dr. John Sarno. Dr. Sarno was a medical doctor at NYU. And he passed away a number of years ago in his 90s. But he wrote a bunch of books, and finally, someone recommended a Sarno book to me after going to doctors and a chiropractor and acupuncturists and looking for all kinds of solutions, changing my mattress and changing all these kinds of things about the way I was living physically, and none of it was really getting the job done. And when I got the right information from Dr. Sarno's book, I started to catch on to, oh, you know what? I actually can be fine. So it's really important when we catch a glimpse of why we can be fine. So that's what we're here to talk about, is why you all can be fine. Typically, the people who come to see me are having some kind of symptom that's not getting answered, that they can't figure out from medicine or other avenues. And what happens is, if we can really change and organize our thinking and understand it differently, it changes what happens up here, which changes what happens down here. I like to think of the body as one giant extension of my brain. So we're going to talk today about ways that you can change your thinking, how you can organize your thinking about this, and that way you can get relief. So let me talk briefly about the system that I use. The system, it began with Sarno, but I needed to get questions answered. I needed to get my own questions answered. And Sarno, as great as he was, it didn't answer everything. So I had lots of research to do. I needed to talk to people. And as I got my questions answered to my satisfaction, more and more and more, I started to feel more confident that I would get better. And that is when things did change. When it all really clicked, that's when I finally got my back pain relief. Now, I can get relief from all kinds of symptoms. I can get acute symptoms under control. I haven't had any chronic symptoms that I'm stuck with since. And you don't need to have chronic symptoms if you know the things that we're going to talk about. So let's talk briefly about my system. Then we will talk about where to go from here in terms of how to get questions answered. And then we'll just dive right in. So my system, it's something that I call the column system. And the reason that it got that name is that when I started working with people and organizing their thinking in terms of the mind-body process, I found that there were 3 areas of mind-body experience that needed to be separated so that you could see what was what. And this is the emotions, doubt, and power columns. The emotions column is the column that describes what happens for the onset and uptakes of symptoms. Why do they happen in the first place? Well, Dr. Sarno is the one who introduced this idea to me, though it was somewhat familiar to me as a psychologist, that emotions could actually get channeled into the body. Now, we know this is true with crying and blushing. These are things that are emotional experiences that lead to a physical change, but they're everyday experiences. Well, this can also happen with pain and other symptoms that can go way out of whack. And once that gets rolling, there's a feedback loop between the mind and the body. So these acute symptoms we can get under control if we understand the emotion. Why is that? The function in the emotions column of the symptoms is distraction. The symptom itself is what keeps you from discovering the emotion underneath that's bothering you. So if you can discover the emotion underneath that's bothering you, you take away the symptom function, and that acute symptom can just vanish. And I'm going to help you guys learn how to recognize what column's what. In the doubt column, though, we're dealing with symptoms that are either seemingly chronic, just kind of always there, or very, very recurrent, which also is seemingly chronic. The symptoms that keep staying there, they don't happen because of emotions. Our emotions are changing all the time. They happen because of our thinking. And so the doubt column is about your thinking and changing that thinking. If we can change the thinking, we can change what goes on in the body. Now, the function of symptoms in the doubt column is protection. It's not distraction. It's not trying to distract you and keep a feeling in your unconscious. It is trying to protect you from things it feels that you feel are dangerous. But the problem is we have mistaken notions of what is dangerous. Doubt especially does. We have to convince it with science and logic that there actually is no danger. And that's a big part of what happens with mind-body symptoms and how we can convince ourselves that actually we're safe. But we have to have the right understanding. This is all about information. That's the key point of why this Q&A is needed, is that you guys have questions that need to be answered. And if you don't have them answered, doubt continues, the thoughts continue, the symptoms continue. The power column is about your relationship with yourself, and you won't discover power column symptoms much until doubt is way down and you've discovered your emotional life. But once that happens, then there are symptom plateaus where we can kind of get stuck. We're recovering, it's going well, but we hit a plateau. That signals to me there's a power column symptom happening. And in the power column, the function of the symptoms is not distraction, it is not protection, it is communication. There is a part of us where our bodies are speaking to us, trying to get us to be our best selves, to be fully aligned with who we are. And if we're not, the symptoms will object. So these are the three ways that symptoms operate. That's the column system. When I answer any of these questions, I'm going to be answering them in that format. All right, so I'm going to answer a few questions, then I'm going to talk at various points about the resources that are available on my website to help, and we'll go from there. All right. Sarah Kelly Burke, good to see you here. I know you're here from England, so you're up late. Thank you for joining us. Kieran Ainge, thank you for joining us here as well. Jamie, thank you for being here. Nurse B, good to see you. Felipe Cabrera, good to see you. Darlene, Solitary Daughter, and LJP Wright, thank you for joining us on Instagram. That's the Instagram hellos. Now let me say a few hellos on YouTube. Hillel says, hi, Dan. Good to see you, Hillel. Kasim says, hi, Dan and everyone. Kasim, great to see you. Susan Sereno, great to see you. Thank you for saying hi. Dorisa, same. Hi, Dan and pain-free community. I appreciate that. Now, listen, if you're not pain-free, I think Dorisa knows this and probably agrees with this. You can be on the way to it. It's not about whether you are pain-free or not. We've got lots of people saying hi to each other because this is a community. We really get to know each other. Beatrice, thank you for saying hi. Saying hi to all. Okay, we've got a bunch of questions rolling in. I'll get to them in a second. Felipe Cabrera says, hey, Dr. Ratner, great to see you. Thank you, Felipe. It is great to see you as well. All right, let's get in with a couple of questions. I'll start with Sarah, especially since you're up late in England. I believe that's where you're from. Okay, can I ask about the power column? The answer of can you ask about anything is always yes. And there are no stupid questions here, guys, really, because these are questions that go on in your head. Somebody's got to help you deal with these questions. By the way, Jamie, thank you for not only for saying hi to me, but to the Crushing Doubt community. This is a community where we support each other and where we help each other bring down doubts, which is a little bit different than the rest of the mind-body community, which they certainly try to help each other, but they don't always focus on making sure doubt doesn't go up. So sometimes somebody can answer a question that helps one person, but makes somebody else's doubt go up. Here, I'm trying to concentrate on everybody's doubt coming down. And the key variable to that is you make sense and your symptoms make sense. We can make sense of it all. Okay, Sarah's got a question. Once you have filled out your columns, what do I do with the information from the power column? Is it about identifying what's holding you back and then changing your beliefs and self-talk. All right, so in the power column, there are two main tasks. And I think what Sarah's talking about is that the first task is building something called the core narrative. The core narrative is the story of your core suffering self. We all have different parts of our experience and our identity. And some of them aren't suffering at all. Some of them have a great time. But we all suffer in certain ways. And some of us have suffered very, very deeply. The core narrative is the story of how you've suffered. And so when you've written that information down, when you feel like you really got it, Sarah, the first thing I'll say is this. When you've got that information down, I want you to take a look at it again. I want you to think about, does this cover everything? Does it feel really complete? If it does, I'll tell you what, that core narrative will either make you very angry or very sad or both. Because if you really nailed the story of your suffering, it hurts. And I don't mean that as a bad thing. I mean it as a good thing because it's a step forward. You're going to be able to see what's going on for you. So you said, is it about identifying what's holding you back and then changing your beliefs and self-talk? That is a part of it. But I think what you'll find, Sarah, is that the first thing it is about accepting. And I don't mean accepting like you're fine with it, but accepting like you're not going to run away from the reality of it. Really seeing what happened to you. And I can guarantee you what happened to you all is even worse than what you thought. And I don't mean that pessimistically. I just mean that when you write out a core narrative, it typically isn't, it's not strong enough. There's a lot that we went through that was devastating, really hard at such a level. When I recognized my own trauma in that way, nothing hurt worse. I didn't realize that I was hurting even worse than I thought. So you say, is it about identifying what's holding you back? Yes, it is. But actually, it's first identifying what hurt in the first place. Then you can see what's holding you back. And then you can see what changes in beliefs and self-talk might come from that. Now, Sarah, there's this is for Sarah, but it's for everybody. There are 3 sentences in the core narrative. The first one is the central way you've suffered, which usually can get summed up by a big ticket item and relates to some specific events. The second sentence is, how did that suffering lead to more suffering in your experiential life? What did it lead to? How did it affect your relationships, your school, your school experience, your career? How did it affect your friendships? How did it affect your family life, etc.? And the third sentence, which really can't be written until you've really got the first 2 down, is what are you going to do about it? So that's what you're asking about, Sarah. And yeah, that's what you're going to do. But where we are right now, because you just have started this, is I think we need to evaluate sentence 1 and 2 and see, did you really totally nail that? And I don't mean that in any critical way. It's more just honing it. And this is a part of what I can do to help. By the way, let me get into this and then I'll get more questions coming in. So I want to talk a little bit about the resources on my website. And the reason for that is there are certain things that you can get here in the Q&A, and then there's other things that you may need more help with. And so on my website, there's 2 main ways that you can get help. My book is coming out January 8th, so that'll be a third way that you can order through my website. Though the push is to get it on Amazon first. We want to drive that to be a bestseller to show that, to show Amazon and other people that this is a subject that's very important. And by the way, in the news recently, with the shooting of the United Healthcare CEO, that the shooter actually had read Dr. Sarno. He had a back surgery, a failed back surgery. He was very frustrated by this. These are very important topics, and we need to be talking about this and have resources out there. So my book will be out January 8th, which is a great resource, certainly in my estimation, but I think you guys will find so too. But one of the great things about it is it's cost effective. People can read it. They can get the right information. All of my resources are actually quite cost effective, but the book is costs even less. Now on my website, which is www.crushingdoubt.com or .org, but it's .com is the main one, you can find my teaching seminars. These teaching seminars give you all the information you need to understand really all of mind-body thinking, including what people talk about within the mind-body field. Why does this person say to journal? Why does this person say to ignore the symptoms? Why does this person say to return to normal physical activity? What I've found is that all of these things that they're saying do help. But the question is, do they help everybody? And do they always help? And the answer to those questions is no. My system can help you, everybody, because it is flexible. It knows when to apply what. So the seminar talks about that. It also brings down doubt a lot about why it is a mind-body symptom that you most likely have, why you can get better from it. It really attacks all the different doubts or a lot of the doubts that people can have. And then it introduces the column system. So it is a great learning tool to get you up to speed. What I found, though, is that I would do these seminars and then people had questions and they needed my help to implement the system. Well, that is what my group membership is for. Also available on my website. There are 3 different levels of it. You can come once, twice, or 3 times a week, and I'm there all the time to answer questions and walk you through the system. And it's a little bit like this Q&A, but one thing I want to say about the groups is it's significantly more impactful than even this Q&A because there's a give and take. Well, there's a couple of reasons, but one is there's a give and take. So you ask a question and I say something back. If I were having this discussion with Sarah, we would have had multiple questions by now on these. They're Zoom calls. They're not recorded. And we could have gotten even further. We get a lot further in one sitting just asking some questions. Meanwhile, you also get the benefit of watching other people go through this process. And then thirdly, it is a great support. It is an incredible group of people. And it's not easy getting back past mind-body issues. You need reassurance. You need bolstering. You need support. You need belief. And the groups provide those things. Not just me, but the group itself. So if anybody wants to talk to me about those, you can email me, dan@crushingdoubt.org, or check out the website, www.crushingdoubt.com. Okay, let's jump in with another question. Hillel says, while I thought on the situation, so he's got a current situation going on, I had an uptick, serious back pain. Okay, so an uptick, onset or uptick? Guess what I'm thinking, guys? Emotions column. What's happening here? Then he says, but I didn't have it today, even after the conversation with Efrat this morning. So I'm a bit confused about it. Okay, this is interesting. While I thought on the situation, I had an uptick, but I didn't have it today, even after the conversation with Efrat this morning. So I'm a bit confused about it. So let me see if you said something further. I'm also wondering what could be not just the emotional theme, but the power message. Is the power message about myself believing that what Efrat said is right? I don't think. What do you think? Okay. So first of all, Efrat is the medical doctor. She's a fantastic mind-body medical doctor. And she's somebody who's a colleague of mine, but she's working with Hillel on the medical side. I work with him as on the psychological side and the column side. And so I'm going to weigh in about this. This will be for Hillel, but I want to encourage you all. When I answer any question, it's for everybody. All right. So let's go back to it. While I was thinking about the situation, I had an uptick, but I didn't have it today, even after the conversation with Efrat. He had a difficult conversation where Efrat thinks one thing, Hillel thinks another. And so then he says, is the power message about myself believing that what she said is right? I don't think. What do you think? No, I actually think, Hillel, what this is showing us is that you had an uptick when you were uncertain. You had an uptick when you were afraid that you were dependent on another person and you were worried about what she was going to say and you needed her to see your power. And then interestingly, I think you actually got some symptom relief, even if it was, emotionally upsetting that she didn't agree with you. I think you got some symptom relief, or at least there weren't symptoms, because you were certain. You knew what you thought. So I don't think this is about you believing that what she said is right. I think it's exactly the opposite. I think it's about the fact that you knew that you were right, that you're the one who knows what's best for you. And by the way, that's power. Power is Hillel knows what's best for him. Now, there are times where doubt's going to warp that. It's going to confuse us. And we think we know what's best for us, but really it's doubt leading us astray. But once doubt is cleared out, you can start to connect with you and what you need. And so I think that you didn't get an emotions column symptom because you were aligned with yourself. And so not only was the power in a good spot, but also your emotions column wasn't really needing to bring anything up. You weren't as upset. You were consciously upset, but you weren't unconsciously upset because you were aligned. Hello, let me know if that made sense to you. And anybody else can chime in if I said something and you're not sure what I meant by something. Please chime in. Janet Randolph, thanks for joining us here. I love Mind Body Work has joined here as well. Thank you for joining us here. Okay, Sarah Kelly Burke says, thank you. So what you were saying is understand what got you here. Change your thinking and self-compassion. Think I understand. You do understand, Sarah. You got it nailed. But if you need help with the specifics, this is part of what those resources on my website are for, right? And the chance to interact directly with me is for, because it's not easy to do it alone. I had to do it largely alone. When I discovered Sarno, I felt a lot less alone. And then I discovered certain resources that helped some more. But ultimately, I felt like I had to collect the information and get it right. Okay. So, Sarah, keep asking the questions. But yes, you are on the right path. Okay. Kasim said, had trauma activation after trauma activation today. I'm so sorry, Kasim. Full of rage today. Got home and calmed down. That was when the nausea came on. It was there at work at the start, but then trauma activation. Let me see if trauma activation started and the nausea went away. By then it tried to come back, but then I raged again at the world and it went down, but now it's back. Any ideas? Okay. So the first thing, Kasim, is I'll say this. What you're noticing is that when you were actively angry, the nausea went down. And I think that's not an accident. I think the nausea, as we know, relates to that metaphoric theme of you make me sick, right? Remember that? A lot of times at work, you can feel like they make you sick. But when you're angry about it, that's the emotion that was that was leading to that symptom distraction. And so when you get actively angry about it, you can actually bring down that acute symptom. So that's good. What I would do when nausea comes on is think about, what am I angry about? That's what I want you thinking about, because that can control that acute symptom. Then the next step, though, because the goal isn't just to become angry and sit there and rage all the time. Then the goal would be to take that anger, go into your power column, and think about, now, wait a minute. How have I suffered? What do I need? And how can I channel this anger? I say this all the time to people, that I channel my rage. I use it. And people say, what do you mean by that? And so one of the things that I mean by that is I wrote this book out of my rage. I formed this podcast out of my rage because I didn't have what I needed to get better. I had 8 years of suffering where really no one was in it with me, and they didn't really seem to care that much. Even the people who care about me kind of would say, oh, what a shame. But they weren't rolling up their sleeves and saying, let me see if I can figure this out. Let me look into this with you, right? No one was there. So I'm still pretty mad about the fact that happened, but I'm channeling that rage. And so, Kasim, I think the next step is going to be, first of all, you're doing a great job recognizing a trauma activation, calming yourself down. That's beautiful. That's important. You're also doing a great job recognizing the feeling underneath, which helps you control those acute symptoms and keeps it from becoming seemingly chronic in any way, even though you may have worries about that, in which case we'll bring down doubt. The next step is going to be in the power column, enacting that sentence 3. What are you going to do about it? And I'm here to help you think about that. But when you say any ideas, I want us to start thinking about, if you could channel your aggression, if you could start making the world, even in a small way, more like you want it to be, what would that look like? Let's start asking those questions, Kasim, and you and I will explore that together. But I actually, believe it or not, I don't love that you have the rage because you were given it. I don't love what you're mad about, of course, but I love this fuel that you have that is the rage. We're going to use. We're going to use it to build the life you want, because you're not going to take it, and that's good. And I don't mean that in like a going postal sort of way. I mean it more in a channeled, powerful moves that align with you. I think you know that, Kasim, but I'm kind of more saying that for everybody who's listening. Okay. But let me know what you think about that. I want us to think about power. So keep doubt down, manage those emotions, column symptoms by bringing the feeling into awareness. And then we're going to channel that anger. We're going to build the life you want. Orion Tate, good to see you, my friend. Friend of mine from Brooklyn. When we lived there for 15 years. We miss you guys. We'll be back soon, Orion. I'll let you know when we're in. Okay. DMR LCSW, thank you for being here. Amir, thank you for joining us here as well. Hypocrite in a hippie crypt. I like that name. Thank you for joining us here. And Bayer Maggie, thank you for joining us here as well. All right. Susan Sereno, when I have pain in the middle of the night and it's so intense, I have thoughts that cause doubt. I feel scared and I'm so sleepy that I wonder why this is happening. I don't have doubt during the day. I think this is setting me back or keeping me stuck. Can you let me know what you think? I appreciate you and our group. Okay, thanks for the appreciation, Susan. So, this is a question that you've been chewing on for a while. You're trying to figure out, why am I having these symptoms at night? And of course, I've said to you certain things. So I'm going to repeat these, but then I'm going to get into something more specific. The thing I'm going to repeat, this is for Susan, but it's for everybody, is she's having onsets and upticks. That's an emotions column symptom. So I know you say you don't have doubt during the day, and that's actually good. That didn't used to be the case. We have worked on things. We've brought down the doubt so that when your rational mind is involved, no, this is all mind body symptoms. What you're describing is that these nighttime symptoms, they scare you, right? And of course, you said that directly. I feel scared. But fear is the emotional form of doubt. So what that means is you're having an emotions column symptom, and it's going right into the highest form of doubt. When I say highest form, I just mean the strongest form. The forms of doubt are fear, confusion, lack of certainty, and questions. Fear it's so disabling you can barely even think. But once fear comes down and you still don't know what's going on, you're confused. But that's still progress, because at least you're not afraid, but you have no idea what's going on. Once we get some idea of what's going on, confusion goes down. And then you have lack of certainty. I think I know what's going on, but I'm not sure. That's progress also. Then you get to a point where you're starting to feel pretty certain, but you've just got questions that need to hone this experience. What you're describing, though, Susan, is when you have doubt, it's at the fear level. So we want to start moving you through what I call the fear confidence spectrum. We want to move you from fear into confusion. I know that confusion doesn't sound good, but actually it's much better than fear, because that's where we can start to think about things intellectually. Fear is the emotional form of doubt. It keeps you from even thinking intellectually. Once you're thinking intellectually, even if you're totally confused, at least you're engaged with the discussion with yourself about doubt. So, and then you can get to confusion down, because things can start to make more sense. And then you can start to get more and more certain, and you can get lack of certainty down. And then you can ask your questions. Now, you're asking great questions, so it's good. You're already engaged in that part of the work. But the first thing is, let's try to bring down your fear. I'm going to answer that first. One way that you could be less afraid of this is if we had you feel confident that getting answers would actually alleviate these symptoms, which is actually completely true, because these are emotions column symptoms. The only thing that needs to be discovered is, what is the emotion that's leading to them? And the only doubt that needs to be resolved is that discovering that emotional experience actually would take the symptoms away. Because what you're really afraid of, if I understand you correctly, and you've said this before, so I think I am I always going to have these symptoms? But you're not. You're not always going to have these symptoms, because I know how to help you control them. The system is there to control these things. So that's how we'll bring the doubt down. But you asked me, what do I think, about this all? And the main thing that I think is, once you bring down that fear enough, then we can start to think about, all right, what's happening emotionally? Now, if it's waking you up in the middle of the night, that you're having dreams. And a lot of times people say, but I can't remember my dreams, or I don't know what my dreams mean. Good news, you don't need to. There's two things that are going for us that we can always look at. One is, symptoms are like a waking dream. So you're actually still dreaming even once you woke up. It's just now you're dreaming in symptom form. So now we need to think about, what do these symptoms mean? And the way you can do that is to look at the timing of the symptoms and think about the themes, the emotional themes that are going on for you right then. But if you can't find that, because you just woke up and let's say you're foggy and you don't really know what you're thinking and you don't remember the dream, you can go back to the day before and you can think about what happened the day before. Why is that important? Because dreams are informed by the day before. They're informed by two things: your overall emotional life structure, which comes from your growing up and the experiences that you've consistently had and kind of who you are at your core. That's all built in. But the events of the day before get combined with that. And that's what we dream about. So I want to do two things, Susan. I want to bring down the fear and start moving it into more of that intellectual discussion to recognize you don't need to worry about this because this is just emotions column symptoms. We will get this under control. That will bring down the fear, at least potentially. But remember, it doesn't matter what I think. It matters what you think. So if that doesn't get your fear under control, I need to hear more from you about what is the fear. This is one of those reasons why the group is so important, because if Susan and I are having this discussion in group, she could tell me what she's afraid of, and then I could give her feedback on that, and then she might have feedback to that. So we just get a lot further in a short amount of time. But what do I think? We want to bring down that fear, keep bringing down the doubt that you can get this under control. You absolutely can. There's no reason to think you can't, because these are emotions column symptoms, and I know how to do that. I just need to show you that. But you're new to that, Susan. Much of our work has been the doubt column. Now we can focus on the emotions column. And I know you know that, but we need to dive in with that. And here's the way to do that, guys. This is not just for Susan, but for all of you. It's when you're dealing with the emotions column symptoms, one thing you can do is to build out your emotional themes. This is something that I can show people in group. I talk about it in the seminars. It's certainly going to be in my book. Well, it is in my book, but as soon as you have the book in your hands, you'll be able to read it. And this allows you to understand how to build the themes. What kinds of themes are we talking about? What kind of experiences create a theme? What's important enough to be a theme? How do I organize mine? And I walk you through that in the book. I walk you through that in the seminar, and I'll certainly walk you through that directly in the groups. So that's what we need to do, Susan. Let me know if that makes sense to you. Alex Hartenbaum, thanks for joining us on Instagram. Good to see you here. Please do let me know if you have any questions. And if you're coming in the middle and you're like, what are they talking about? I can't follow. Feel free to ask questions about it. There's no stupid questions, and I want to orient you to whatever's happening. By the way, if I missed any questions, either on Instagram or on YouTube, don't hesitate to bring it up again. The last thing I want is for people to feel ignored here. The whole point is for you guys to feel good about you, about your emotional experience, that you can have different experiences than you have before. So I don't want anyone feeling ignored. All right. Russell Crane's music. Good to see you, Russell. Recently had mild pneumonia. I saw the doc today and he cleared me to get back to my regular life. Glad to hear about that, but I still am having symptoms. Is it possible these symptoms, nausea, headache, insomnia, are TMS? So TMS is tension myositis syndrome. That's what Sarno called mind-body issues. There's many different terms for this. You might hear neuroplastic. You might hear mind-body. Some people call it mind-body syndrome. I stay away from syndrome and disorder. People say a PPD, which is psychophysiological disorder. I especially stay away from disorder. This is all the human condition. We are mind-body beings. Now, Russell, is it possible these symptoms are mind-body? Not only is it possible, but it's actually improbable that somebody who is who tends towards mind-body symptoms would have some kind of illness and then not have a mind-body symptom. So lingering coughs, these can be mind-body symptoms. And remember, they're mind-body symptoms. Now, what that means is it's not just in your mind. It becomes real in the body, and it can linger in the body. So if you've got a cough that's staying on because you had a cold, let's say, that can become it can be a mind-body symptom, but it can stay there if you think, oh, maybe I've got something lingering. This is a very common experience. This is for Russell, but for everybody. It's a very common experience to have what I would call a trigger. It's something from the environment that makes you think, uh-oh, I could have more symptoms. Well, an illness is a trigger. It's going to make you think, oh, maybe I'm going to have more of this. So not only is it possible these symptoms are mind-body, it's very, very likely. And I want you to go ahead and treat them as such, which is also another way that you can kind of discover that it is mind-body, because if you treat it as such and you get relief, that helps. And it helps you know what it is. Now, if you don't get relief from it, not to worry. That doesn't mean it's not mind-body. It could mean there's doubt there. And even just in asking the question is what I call the gold standard of doubt. It's great. It's a great way to deal with doubt, but it's still doubt. You're not sure. So, Russell, I will answer that question for you, but you may have to follow up with another question, because it doesn't matter if I am certain about this. It matters if you are. I think these symptoms are 100% mind-body. The doctor cleared you, And doctors are very good at certain things. They're not good at some other things, but they are good at knowing when we are medically in danger and when symptoms are not likely to continue for purely medical causes. And so I think that that's the case. It's scary to get back on your feet from anything, and it can bring up symptoms. Russell, let me know if that made sense to you. Rita, thanks for joining us here. Good to see you. Rita's a great mind-body coach in the field who actually trained in the column system with me. Good to see you. Official Cindy Mitch, thanks for joining us here as well. Felipe said, I'm having this same issue with a lingering cold, have had a stressful week. So I'm sorry it's been stressful, Felipe, but I do think it's great that you're aware of this idea because that's going to give you a chance to think about that. When people don't have the chance to think about it from a mind-body standpoint, all kinds of bad things can happen. And I don't mean that to scare anyone. What I'm actually meaning to validate what you guys are probably experiencing out there, that so many people in the world don't know about these things, and we see it happen all the time. They get into all kinds of difficulties. The guy who shot the insurance CEO, he had a mind-body condition by all the sounds of it. I can't know because I didn't talk to him directly. I didn't evaluate him, but we know he wasn't getting help from the other things that he was trying, and this rings very true for what many of us in the mind-body field see over and over and over. He didn't have that information. So, Felipe, I'm sorry you had a stressful week, but knowing what you know, what we can do is to actually analyze, well, what was the stress of the week? I'm not saying that to be like, oh, it's no big deal. Not at all. The opposite. What I'm saying is, instead of leaving it as a general thing, I'm not saying you're doing this, by the way, Felipe, but for everybody, when you're thinking that you're under stress, I want you to get specific. In the emotions column, very, very helpful to get specific. What was the stress? Like, it could be stressful for all kinds of reasons, but maybe the main thing was I didn't feel respected, or I didn't feel safe, or I felt a huge uncertainty about my situation, and I had to deal with that. So let's get specific. But symptoms, they won't last. Even when you're having these things drag on, either because, like with Russell, there's some trigger from a past symptom that's lingering, or the stress is having, a virus hang out for longer. Either way, you can resolve it. Solitary Daughter says, hi, good to see you here. Please do let me know if you have questions, okay? All right. Hillel is referring back to what he was saying, clarifying the uptick was 2 hours ago. The meeting was 14 hours ago. Okay. Okay, got it. So why didn't I have it during the meeting, but then I did have it later? Okay, so that's, thank you for the clarification. Let me see if you said anything else about that, Hillel. Yes. Follow up. The symptom came while I was getting ready for our call. So this was something Hillel and I talked directly. Maybe it's related to me being afraid that I'll experience rejection again. Of course. I think it's something here, but what's the specific? But if this is, what could be the power message? Well, there's a couple things. First of all, Hillel, the stakes would have felt pretty high when you were calling me, as silly as it may sound, because I know you actually trust me. If I were to disappoint you, it would hurt more because you trust me. So the stakes were high. You had just been let down, and I think you were even prepared for that one. You had an instinct about it. And but with me, your instincts were, I think, he's going to agree with me on this, but I think some part of you was like, what if he doesn't? What if he agrees with what Efrat's saying here? Then there could be trouble, right? So I think you were afraid of that, and that would make the symptoms go up. That's my guess. I want you to explore it that way, and let's see what you think. Okay, Shell Bell, thanks for joining us on Instagram. Solitary Daughter, I will get your question in just a second. Just want to catch up on some YouTube stuff. Okay, Dorisa said yes, and everybody on their way to advance their journey. Yeah, so she was saying before that it's not so much that we are a pain-free community, but more so that we're on our way, and I love that. Okay, Patty Martin, thanks for joining us here. She says, hi, Dan and everyone. I mean Dan, not Ann. And we knew that, Patty. All right. Good to see you here. Okay. Patty then said, Dan, just curious, do you have anything in your book about aging? Yes, I do. Aging is it's a big deal, not from a purely physical standpoint, actually. Quite the opposite. It's a lot of those things that people worry about that happen with age aren't really correlated with symptoms. But I do have a lot of things in there about how we feel about aging. Aging and mortality is a major theme for emotions column symptoms, and it also has a big role in power. Well, it actually has a big role in all three. It can bring up a lot of doubt. In fact, doubt can naturally be higher when people are older because it's built into their experience. Oh, I'm old now, so these things are going to happen, or I'm not going to heal as fast. All these things we say to ourselves. So aging and mortality, it's sprinkled throughout the book, Patty, but I talk a lot about it. And of course we can talk about it in group here and wherever. It's challenging to doubt because, we think that we're going to decline. And in some ways we decline, but not in the ways we think about. Pain and other symptoms don't tend to come from that. Things like slower reflexes or our eyesight can get worse, but even those are tricky because sometimes that's not what's happening. Sometimes it's just doubt. But the power column is another major place that gets affected by aging and mortality, because the power column symptoms, remember, are communication. They want us to align with ourselves and live a life that's like what we want to do in every way. And the older we get, the more those power column symptoms tend to pressure, because they're saying, hey, let's get a move on. We got to live well for as long as we can. And I want to do it now. So, but that's not a bad thing. They start to push, and they're pushing us in the right direction. So that's good. But yes, I can't wait to hear what you think about how, what I said in there. Hopefully I address it enough, but we'll see. Okay. All right. Thanks for your question, Patty. Solitary Daughter said, I've had SIBO diagnosis for 11 years. I've never had meaningful change with any of the infinite interventions I've tried. I think I feel doubt at times because of how long this has gone on. That would be natural. I'm just checking out something. Okay. Hope. And then she said, to be clear, the interventions were all medical, functional medicine. I'm diving into mind body work now, finally, but my belief can waver. Okay. So first of all, the fact that you're just diving into the mind body work, we can take as a very positive thing, because, you haven't gotten the benefit of this knowledge. And in my experience, pretty much any symptom that is very, very unbudging, and I'm not talking about things like type 1 diabetes where the pancreas doesn't work, where there is a clear medical condition that needed to be treated that would be life or death without it. I'm not talking about those things. But when symptoms linger and doctors don't have a meaningful reason that it would be there, it's mind body. And the good news about that is you're just starting this work. So I know your belief can waver, but you are at the beginning of a very important and good process that I am 100% confident can help you. And I want to encourage you, just keep asking your questions. Get them met. Don't worry if you have doubts along the way. That's natural. Everybody does. But let's talk about what SIBO is. So SIBO is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. That's what it's called. And it's basically medically speaking, they say it's an abnormal increase of bacteria in the small intestine. But so this sounds very in line with mind body. I 100%. If you've gotten it checked out by doctors and then there's nothing major going on that they can identify, which it's been going on for 11 years and they haven't figured it out, this is mind body. You're going to be able to get this under control. And so one thing, you said hope with a question mark. One thing I want to tell you is that, yeah, there can be hope. Remember this phrase: you make sense and your symptoms make sense. This column system can make sense of those those symptoms for you. I've got the different resources to do it. The book coming out January 8th. My seminars and groups are available on my website, www.crushingdoubt.com. You can email me, dan@crushingdoubt.org. because it's hard to have belief all on your own. That's one of the reasons I do all the things I do is I really wished there was someone like me who had these groups where you could come every week. I mean, I would have loved this, or a free Q&A. Like, these are things that I really would have loved, and that's going to help with your belief. Your belief can waver, but what can't waver is your quest for answers, your quest for good answers. Keep at that. Okay, you're doing great, and please do let me know how I can be of help. All right. Hillel then added, maybe that I'm chasing others to support me, and that's not self-alignment, but in my situation, I technically need others. I think this is about the fact that you needed me to show you I'm aligned with you, that yes, it's hard enough to enter power by yourself, but it's extra hard when people don't support it. You can still do it, but it's harder. I entered power with a lot of not support, and it was harder. But Hillel, you actually do have my support. I think you were worried you wouldn't, and I think you know that you do. The question is, all right, where did the symptoms go after that? And they could stay up sometimes because of doubt, even just because you're not sure. But let's analyze it. Okay. Solitary Daughter says, thank you. It is my pleasure. I do hope that helped you, but follow up with questions, and I am going to be here next week, guys, for this Q&A on the 19th. Then I'm going to be away for 2 weeks because of the holidays. But then typically I'm here. All right. Kasim said, I haven't done my third sentence yet. That's of the core narrative. I'll need your help. I am here. I will help you with it. In terms of moving the rage into the power column, I'm not sure how to be rageful in the power column or what sorts of things I want to do to change. So, Kasim, I want to encourage you. I'm telling you the roadmap of where to go. I'm not telling you should know how to do this or even to do it yet. I'm telling you this is the project that we need to work on, is to figure out where might you want to channel that rage. And you know what's going to tell us is the first and second sentence of the core narrative. The third sentence, you can't really figure out without that. So that's totally okay. What I want you to do is bring that to me. Let's look at that first and second sentence. You've learned so much about you. And by the way, you're actually doing this. You're already doing this. You have made adjustments. And so there's just more adjustments to be made. In the power column, there's two main tasks. One is to build this core narrative and then live in alignment with it. And then the second is what I call assessing and adjusting for power. That's the one you're actually talking about here, Kasim, is you were having power dips at work that were leading to symptoms. And we need to adjust once we understand what we see in the assessment. So that's the next step. Okay. I hope that helps, but please do let me know. All right. In reference to Patty's question about aging, our society, including doctors, say aging means aches and pains, especially from arthritis. Can you talk about this? Arthritis has been debunked as being correlated with pain at all. There are many, many studies that show that there is not a correlation between arthritis and pain. And that was utterly shocking to me when I heard it, because the word arthritis, the number one association I have to it is pain. But it turns out that's not right. It seems like it's painful because doctors will look at things and be like, oh, look at all these like bone growths and maybe they're banging into each other. We can imagine it's painful, but it turns out it's not. And here's a way, Susan, that can really tear down the myth that aging causes aches and pains. If aging causes aches and pains, it should be linear. We should just get worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. It makes absolutely no sense to make the argument that aging causes aches and pains and then throw out the data when that doesn't happen. When a 29-year-old's having much more pain than an 80-year-old, which happens all the time. So there's not a linear progression like that. If you're going to be a good scientist, you can't throw out data. People who say that aging means aches and pains, they are throwing out data. They're not looking at the fact that 90-year-olds aren't all writhing on the floor in pain. Typically, they're not. They might be slower. They might have, their muscle quality might have atrophied. We do, unfortunately, decline and ultimately die. And that is very upsetting. And as Sarno said, aging is enraging. And that's true. But it is not the thing that causes pain. In fact, as Sarno pointed out, far more people would come to see him in what he called the responsibility years, because we have so much. I mean, it's all tension related. So, it can be a tense experience to get older, but we would see a very linear progression where the older you get, the more pain and aches there would be. And that's just not the way it works. Where's the science if they're going to ignore that? Let me know if that helps. Okay. Jamie said, since a close friend recently passed away, I've had increased fear of death. Also, doubt has come in to do its part and remind me I've been constantly dizzy for 8 years. Will I heal? Another doubt question. So absolutely. And one of the things I do in my system is to make sense of things. So Jamie, as you know, because we've talked about it, you're having anxiety. You're having dizziness for 8 years is because of doubt. But the dizziness has actually changed some as in the time we've been working on them. However, you also are going through the heart of power column changes. You're breaking away from your family, meaning your parents who have had control over you, and your sister who have had control over you. And, it's actually scary. You are scared. That's all that's happening. You are scared, not just of death, but in some ways, even more so, of breaking free in your life and not being controlled by these people. So I know you say you've been constantly dizzy for 8 years, and I understand that it has been unbroken in a sense, but that's because doubt has been continuing to go. And by the way, power column symptoms are also continuous, but they tend to be at a lower level. Jamie, you have actually had times where that dizziness is lower. Yes, it hasn't gone away, but that's because the power column symptoms are the ones that are keeping that plateau there. So you've got kind of two levels of always there. One is high when doubt is high, and the other is relatively low, but it's still quite uncomfortable when the power column is something that needs to be worked on and the communication needs to be received. So you are definitely going to heal. I can guarantee it for multiple reasons, but one is I just described why it's working the way it's working. Now the question is, what do you think? What do you think about that, and do you agree? All right, and we'll keep talking about it. Monica Liacetti, thank you for joining us here as well. All right, next question from Beatrice. So you said I also wonder, which made me worried that did I miss something? Maybe you saying I also in response to something that someone said. This is one of the disadvantages when I fall behind in questions is I can't remember the time of when things were said. But essentially, I wonder whether my bruised toe is already becoming mind body, as whether continuing to use the cane I was given perpetuates the whole process, since it actually makes me feel more limited. So I think that here's my rule of thumb. I often say it doesn't matter what you do, it matters what you're thinking while you do it. And let's apply that to this. It doesn't matter whether you use the cane or not. It matters what you're thinking while you do it. If you are using the cane and it makes you feel more limited, it makes you feel older, it makes you feel deeper in this process, or that the symptoms are really controlling you, then yep, that cane is adding to doubt. But if you're feeling like I'm in the middle of trying to get better here, and I need to take some of the heat off of this experience and not worry about it so much, I'm just going to temporarily use this to bolster myself, then you could use the cane just fine. But it's sounding like it's going in the other direction. So I would encourage you, ditch the cane. Unless you feel like you really need it from a balance perspective, which, by the way, I'm not saying that to mean you will continue to need that. I just mean for now, I'd put it aside. The chance that bruised toe is largely mind body at this point is pretty high, because bruises don't last that long, and mind body experience can be very, very sensitive and delicate, especially when it's already activated. You got a lot of that going on already. All right, Beatrice, let me know if that makes sense. DMR LCSW says, my pain symptoms are strictly psychological. It stems from trauma. The symptoms hurt like hell. So first of all, so sorry you're having those hurts. I would love to hear about your personal experience and how I can help you with it. I know what that's like. deep psychological pain from trauma is about as bad as it gets. And sometimes we can experience that in our body, but sometimes it can come out in other symptoms like very strong anxiety or panic or feeling depressed or obsessive thinking. Um, these can all be trauma responses and they can all be mind body symptoms. And you're saying the symptoms hurt like hell. So one thing that I could do for you is in the power column. The power column is where we really deal with trauma. The core narrative is a huge part of that. And we could tell the story of your core suffering self that really organizes it and helps you grasp what you've been through. Now, I know that may sound silly because, of course, you know what you've been through. It's not going to be about telling you new information. It's going to be about taking the old information and understanding it in new ways that really help you actually feel for yourself. Not just in a, I hate this and I'm mad that it's happening, but in a deeply empathic sort of way. And so I'd love to talk with you about this if you're open to it. I would send me an email, dan@crushingdoubt.org, and we can talk about how I can get you help in the power column. In fact, in addition to my groups that are Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, Mondays are at 5 p.m. Eastern, Wednesdays are at 12 p.m. Eastern, and Fridays are 2 p.m. Eastern. I also have a power column group for people whose doubts are low enough and they just want to work on power and they just want to work through trauma. The power column group is a great group. It's Tuesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern. And so that's another thing that's available on my website and DMR LCSW. You could check that out or we can talk about it, whatever you think. But the reason that it helps power column work is what we don't realize a lot of the time is that we are experiencing the trauma. We are aware of what we've suffered. We can feel all kinds of things about it. But a lot of times we're not really mourning it. A lot of times we haven't fully accepted it so that we can move on. And the power column is a way of processing that. I sometimes call the power column like high-speed therapy. And it really does work very, very quickly. So I'd be happy to talk with you about that. Okay. Jamie says, thank you, Dan. I agree with you. I will remind myself that I will heal. Yeah, listen, Jamie, you're making sense. Like it'd be one thing if you just were hurting or dizzy and there was no specific reason. You're dizzy while breaking away from your entire family, breaking through the thing you have feared the most in your whole life. It all makes sense. So if things make sense and I can show you why you'd get better, then we can rely on that. Russell Crane's music says, thanks for your thoughtful response, Dan. To follow up, you're welcome. I really want to get back to exercise, but I'm afraid. I tried a few days ago and my heart was beating very hard. This also seems probably anxiety. It is. You can't hurt yourself, Russell. You're going to be fine. Maybe you don't push yourself too much, but do the thing that takes down the doubt. So that could be some mild exercise first. Maybe that doesn't bring up as much doubt. I talk about sometimes triggers. Triggers are things in the environment that can make symptoms go up. Exercising in a strenuous way in this situation would be a trigger. And I say do that last. Get to the triggers last. Do the cognitive work against doubt first. So walk yourself through it and say, if I do mild exercise, that should be fine. And you can take baby steps and slowly but surely you're going to get there. But you don't have to push yourself so hard. All right? So you should be able to get back to full exercise, especially if you're doing, mild exercise leading up to it within a week. So, that's not too long. So I say go for it. But Russell, you got to let me know what you think because it doesn't matter what I think. All right. Or it doesn't matter as much what I think because your mind is the one that is going to determine what happens. Okay. Hillel's follow-up. I think it's about this, but what could be the power message? That I'm chasing others to support me and that's not alignment, but I technically need others in this situation. I'm confused. Okay. So I think we touched on this before actually, but I'm glad I'm revisiting it. I think the power message is you actually know exactly what you need, but you're afraid to recognize that because it first of all, it has some inconvenient aspects to it. You got to deal with certain problems that other people are bringing, but the power message is you need what you need. and it's never going to stop supporting you. The body is the most empathic entity we have. It wants what's good for you, and it refuses to back off otherwise. So the power message is totally aligned with you. And that power message is, you know what you need. And one of the things you need is to not feel that other people have control over your well-being, which you're in a situation where there's some of that in the air. And we've got to get to a place where you can blow right through that in some way and make sure that you stay aligned with you. That's the power message. Okay. Beatrice says, do you think aging affects healing, though? So it does affect it some, but not nearly as much as you would think. So, little kids are like Wolverine. They heal really, really fast. And the older we get, yes, some healing could take longer. And if you look at like 90-year-olds, when they get a bruise, their bruises last longer. It is true. So, and one of the reasons I'm answering this way, Beatrice, is it's important that things make sense. And if I were to say, no, aging doesn't affect healing at all, well, I think you would have some doubts about that. And naturally so, because actually aging does affect healing some. But the key word there is some. And it's a lot less than people think. So, a 70-year-old does not heal as fast as an 8-year-old, but they still do heal every time. Anything that can heal does heal. So, and as far as this bruise with you, maybe it could linger a little bit longer, but anything significant going on from that would be mind body. But ultimately, we've got to convince you. So let me know what you think. Okay, DMRL CSW as a follow-up. Dan, did you have mind body pain as well? I had 8 years of back pain from ages of 28 through 36. I had foot, kind of a nervy kind of foot experience for, I'd say, about a year and a half. Couple of years ago. Well, actually, probably ended about a year ago. I was working that through, and I knew what I was doing because I'm, in the mind body field. I knew what to do about that one, but I still had it. I'm actually currently working through some mind body shoulder pain that's lasted a couple months, but is making great progress because I know what to do. And that all related to me turning 50, my parents moving out of my childhood home, probably the book coming out, all kinds of things happening at the same time. So do I have mind body pain? Yes. In fact, it is the human condition to have mind body experience. Those are the three major ones I think I've had: the back, the foot, and the shoulder. Although I don't even know if we call the shoulder a major one. It's just more of an uptick than I usually have because there was a lot going on. So I hope that helps. But yes, and I have hundreds of mind body symptoms, but I can manage the acute ones. I can master them, and I have nothing that lasts. And I also use the communication of these symptoms to guide me towards power. Okay, I hope that is helpful. Dorisa says, we're going to take a couple more questions and then wrap up. I may need to go through a little bit of a speed round. No, actually, it looks like I mostly caught up. So we're going to finish up on a couple questions. Dorisa said, I have been having a lot of people's feelings talk about aging. It is challenging to block the information. So I'm glad you addressed this in your book. Now, I do want to say this. I may not, hopefully I address it well enough. But one of the challenges in writing this book, and one of the reasons it took as long as it did, is that I had to factor in all of the different doubts that could come in. And they can come from all angles and opposite angles. They can come from young people and from old people and from people who are in certain situations and others. And I had to figure out how does each sentence address these all. So I think I did a very good job with that overall. I'm very pleased with how it came out. But we're going to have to see how that comes out. I think what you'll find, Dorisa and Patty and everybody who's asking questions about this, and I think Susan asked about this too, and Beatrice did. I think what you'll find is it's really the comprehensive understanding of mind-body experience that I answer, to my mind, so well, that not only do I address aging directly, but even indirectly, all of these things that make sense cut through all the doubt that you would have about aging. So the main thing is this book is tearing apart doubt the entire time. And whether it's about aging or not, it's addressing a lot of those things. I'm very interested to hear what you guys think about it, of course. Nothing's perfect, and it's possible that I will, need to address questions that come up about that more. But I'm pretty pleased at how it came out. Patty Martin says, "Thanks, Dan. Your answer was very helpful. I love the way you explained the way aging can affect us. I can't wait to read your book." Thanks, Patty. I really appreciate it. It is wonderful being back here with you all after a couple weeks of not being able to do this particular kind of event. Oh, and actually, no, I did fall behind. Let me catch up. Hold on. Kasim said, "Thanks. I really appreciate your ideas and great support. Thank you. Appreciate it, Kasim." Then Dorisa said, "However, my RA does ache and make me stiff." So rheumatoid arthritis, yeah, that can ache and make people stiff. It gets exacerbated in my experience by emotions column upticks, or power column symptoms can make those go up and down, or doubt. Any of the columns being activated can make that go up. But RA is not really correlated with aging per se. That's more of an autoimmune response, which in my experience speaks to trauma in the background, but then there's a medical condition that comes with that, as autoimmune issues can be. Susan says, "Extremely helpful, Dan. Thank you. You are welcome, Susan." All right. Now, Andy, good to see you here. Dan, I had a stammer in childhood and have neck spasm for the last 7 years. I feel it is TMS, mind body. Recently, I did columns work. I understand it, but I am not healed and don't know what to do. Okay. So here's the thing. When people start doing columns work, usually they're going to have questions. It's very hard to get everything settled all at once and nail those symptoms. And what that usually means when the symptoms are lingering is there's still doubt. And doubt can come in many different forms, but remember, there's 4 main forms: fear, confusion, lack of certainty, and questions. And Andy, if you haven't gotten better from doing the columns work yet, what it means is there's actually questions lingering. Maybe there's even fear or confusion, but there's at least questions. The main thing I would want to work on is doubt. The flow of the columns is this: bring down doubt, understand your emotional life, and enter into power. And Andy, you're I don't mean this as a bad thing, but you are at that part, having just started recently in the columns work, where doubt is going to be the main issue. And once we bring that down, that can help quite a bit. Okay. Also, come back here next week if you want to do follow-up, because we won't be able to get much more in today, but I hope that was helpful. Hillel says, "Interesting. Thank you, Dan. It is my pleasure." Felipe says, "Dan, when you deal with, say, your shoulder problem, for example, do you work the columns from square one, or do you jump to emotions or power, etc.?" So I follow the same process everybody else does. The first thing I do is work against doubt. I talk to myself about how this has to be mind body. Look at the timing of it. And it actually correlated to a physical event on the basketball court, but it was such a minor movement that there's no way that that was an actual injury. And I've had that confirmed, actually, from like talking to a PT about it. And he was like, "No, this isn't an injury. This is muscle tension." And that's what it was. So I do the same thing, Felipe. I worked on the doubt. Then I started looking at the emotions column. That's the next step, is to go into, well, what specifically was bothering me? I knew what some of the themes were, but I needed to get to the details. Then I looked at power, which comes third in that list. And I needed to look at, is this related to, let's say, the book? Because doubt can sometimes come in as an expansion into power. I don't think that was actually the case. I think it was more about turning 50 and my parents moving out of their house. This was like a mourning experience. I was shouldering too much burden. So I do, yes, I do the columns work from square one. I'm doing columns work all day, every day. It's how I think. It's just how my brain works now. And I find it very relieving. I don't find it to be extra work. I feel like it's just automatic. So we can talk more about that, Felipe, but it's a great question. All right, last question or two. Beatrice says, "Does aging affect TMS healing?" I guess I meant, okay, so mind-body healing. No, that should not have any effect on it. The only way that it can affect things is the physical processes can sometimes be a bit slower, but not by much. And especially in mind-body conditions, like if you get an emotions column symptom and you hit on the exact right emotion, a 90-year-old should get the same relief as a 10-year-old. Doesn't matter at all, because it's working on a different system. generally speaking, unless it's like, how do I think about this? No, I would say there's no effect of aging on it. No. Mind body symptoms work the way that they work. Beatrice said, I'm told bone bruise is much deeper, all just creates more doubt. So bone bruises are deeper than your average bruise, but they still heal more quickly than people expect. Here's the other thing. Bone bruises are one of many things that people are saying, oh, you know why it's lingering? Because this was a bone bruise, not just a bruise. Well, this is just yet another diagnosis they're giving, yet another explanation for why it's taking longer, because they're missing the key ingredient, which is its mind body. Beatrice says, but I'm fighting it. And I love to see that. Fight it. There's no reason that anything, bone bruise or not, which I'm not saying it is, but whether it is or not, it shouldn't matter at all. You should be getting significantly better by this point. Enough time has passed for any kind of bruise to be healing quite well. And this is very mind-body driven. Okay, Felipe says, got it. Thanks. It's my pleasure, Felipe. We'll keep talking about it. And last thing before we wrap up, Andy says, thanks, Dan. I asked questions and cleared some doubt I had with the person I was doing columns work. But when I am just by myself, it feels like I'm on a plateau and not sure what to do next to heal. Aha. So the word plateau tells me you've gotten better to a certain point. This is probably a power column issue. So you've worked through the doubt, but now power is where things need to go. So I don't know if you've gotten to work through the core narrative, if you've done power column work specifically, but I can answer the specific questions. And there are, aspects of how I work that can help you. You could come to my power group. But I think the first step would be for us to just connect more offline. So send me an email, dan@crushingdoubt.org, and I can give you some tips about where do we go next. I maybe need to know a little bit more. But the great thing is the columns really, they provide a comprehensive system of where to go. I'm going to know exactly where to point you based on what you tell me. And hopefully what I just said already helps, but we'll keep at it. But I highly encourage you. Let's get in touch. Let's talk about this, okay? All right, everybody. It has been a pleasure. I will be here next week. Keep your questions coming. You need answers to get better. That's the key here. So you keep asking your questions. I'll give you answers, and you push for more if you need follow-up. All right. It is my pleasure. I wish you all the best, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Thanks, everybody.